parler des verbes conjugués et des infinitifs. C'est quelque chose que nous voyons très souvent. So we are always looking at conjugated verbs and infinitives in sentences because we learned as little onesies that once we have one conjugated verb, we will never conjugate the second verb. So here are 4 examples. Take a look. On peut réussir. Tout le monde commence à recycler. J'ai décidé de devenir. Je rêve de voir. So here we've got on peut réussir. We are able to succeed. Conjugated verb, infinitive. Tout le monde commence à recycler. Everyone starts to recycle. Conjugated verb, infinitive. J'ai décidé de devenir. Conjugated verb, infinitive. Je rêve de voir. Conjugated verb, infinitive. What you'll notice is that between the conjugated verb and the infinitive, depending on the sentence, sometimes there's a word, sometimes there's not. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is what comes between these conjugated verbs and their infinitives. We have 3 options. We can have a verb plus a plus the infinitive. We can have a verb plus de plus the infinitive. Or we can have a verb followed simply by the infinitive. Madame, how do I know? The answer is, well, you just have to memorize what verbs take what prepositions, if any. A and de are prepositions. When you look these verbs up in the dictionary or on word reference, usually after them they will have a or de if they are needed. So let's take a look first at all the verbs that need a. 3 columns into your notes. Here's the first column. Aider à, to help someone. So if I were to say, I help you learn French, je vous aide à parler français. S'amuser, to have fun, always followed by a. Apprendre à. Commencer à. Continuer à. Inviter à. Réussir à. These are all followed by a. Our example in the front was, tout le monde commence à recycler. Everybody starts to recycle. So these verbs are always followed by a. And what you should start to get in the habit of is when you say this conjugated verb, you should always follow it by a, sort of instinctively. So if I say commencer, you should say a. If I were to say réussir, you would say a, just to sort of get used to hearing the a behind these conjugated verbs. All right, here are our verbs that take does before the infinitive comes along, starting with arrêter de, to stop. Choisir de, to choose to do something. Décider de, to decide to do something. Demander de, to ask someone or demand someone to do something. Se dépêcher de, to hurry to do something. Dire de, to say something. Finir de, to finish doing something. Offrir de, to offer to do something. Rêver de, to dream of something. Je rêve de voir un changement. I dream of seeing. So notice this is interesting in English. I dream of seeing. I dream to see. It might not be conjugated in English with the infinitive, but the infinitive is necessary because we have a conjugated verb. Our last category are verbs that are followed simply by the infinitive. There's no prepositions whatsoever, and these should be familiar to you. A lot of them we've been using over and over again. So let's start with aimer. Alright, this is the first verb you ever learned to like. You always said j'aime jouer au foot, j'aime danser, j'aime dormir, j'aime parler français. So we're not learning anything new here. We're just reminding you of something you learned back in the day. Aller, to go. Remember the future proche? I am going to finish my homework. Je vais finir. Compter is a new one, to intend to do something. If you're planning on doing something, you would put compter, conjugate it, and then an infinitive. Désirer, to wish or to want. Devoir, to have to. These were our modal verbs, along with falloir, to be necessary. Penser, if you're thinking about doing something, like I'm thinking of becoming a doctor. Je pense devenir. Devenir is your infinitive. Pouvoir, to be able to. Préférer, to prefer. Savoir, to know. Remember, like I know how to swim. Je sais nager. and vouloir to want. Our example was on peut réussir. We are able to succeed. So that's really all the notes. We just have to start memorizing our verbs and whether they're followed by a or de or nothing before the infinitive comes along. À demain, mes amis!